In Nagoya, Korean woman Jung-yin is having lunch when unexpectedly, an earthquake hits the area, causing her to shock and rush outside. In the streets, she encounters additional Korean person, Do-hyun, who is recording the whole deal. Seeing how surprised she is, Do-hyun takes her to a special house built by a seismic design architect, making it the safest place in Japan. Earthquakes are Do-hyun's field of work, and Jung-yin has come to Japan to learn new cooking techniques. The two of them bond over tea, and when Jung-yin gets scared thinking additional earthquake is coming when it's certainly her vibrating phone, Do-hyun discovers her charming and invites her to lunch as he mentions she's beautiful. Do-hyun and Jung-yin spend all their time in Japan together and become a very happy couple, eventually getting married. 7 years later nonetheless, things aren't jovial anymore. Jung-yin has become a very grumpy woman, always complaining about every little thing and hating on anything under the sun. Whenever the newspaper boy comes by every morning because they have a subscription, she picks fights with him because he ignores the no newspaper sign, even calling him names. She does cook tremendous meals for Do-hyun, but she barely allows him to speak because she goes on prolonged rants, and even follows him to the bathroom to keep on talking to him. She also gets additional grumpy whenever someone points out they still don't have kids. Tired of her, Do-hyun has tried to mention the idea of breaking up, but when he does, Jung-yin throws a fit and Do-hyun takes it back. One sunrise at work, Do-hyun hears about a position out of state that would be the perfect chance to get away from Jung-in. Unfortunately, there's another employee that also wants the position, and the company will have to think about who deserves it more. Do-hyun expires up getting on his knees to beg his coworker to let him take the position, and he wins. He gives Jung-in the news over dinner at a fancy restaurant, saying her it's not necessary for her to visit more than once a month, and pointing out how he's doing this to provide for her, which helps get her less angry. When they get residence, Jung-in wants to get busy on the table and Do-hyun refuses, only to change his mind when she mentions going to visit him more often at work. Some days later, Do-hyun motions to the countryside to start his new job. There, he gets to reconnect with his old friend Song, who works at the local radio with DJ Choi. When he goes to his new house in the evening, he can't help noticing there, he gets to reconnect with his old friend Song, who works at the local radio with DJ Choi. When he goes to his new house in the evening, he can't help noticing there are women moan by his neighbor's door. The most shocking shock, though, is that Jung-in is in the house waiting for him. She's decided to move here with him as a way to start over, since their relationship's obviously having some trouble. The following day, Do-hyun learns there will be a welcome party and that employees are supposed to bring their spouses, so now Do-hyun must think of something to stop Jung-in from going. When he returns residence, he notices heartbroken women of all nationalities going again after his neighbor Sung-ki, who calls himself a Casanova. Subsequently, Do-hyun warns Jung-in about the party, and seeing as she hates those kinds of parties, he offers to tell his boss that she's sick. Jung-in refuses though, because she thinks it's her duty to assist him, so a desperate Do-hyun throws a soapy plate on the floor to make her slip and break her leg. The darkness of the party, Do-hyun apologizes to his boss, mentioning his wife is sadly in a cast, but Jung-in shocks him by indicating up anyway, funding herself on a crutch. She's well-mannered when she meets the boss, but when she goes inside to mingle with the other wives, things don't go well. The other wives judge her for her heavy makeup and her lack of kids, so Jung-in gets uncomfortable and causes a scene where she accidentally pulls the tablecloth with her crutch and breaks a bunch of stuff. Do-hyun brings her home in a taxi, but she keeps crying and ranting to him through her phone, only stopping to argue with the driver. When Jung-in gets home, she notices Sung-ki is on the roof, considering stopping things, and Jung-in calls the police to report a murder. Moments later at the depot, all the women are waiting outside while Sung-ki gives his statement to an officer and Jung-in scolds him for not thinking his life is precious. Do-hyun comes over to pick up Jung-in, and one of the cops warns him about Sung-ki. He's well known in town for being a Casanova that women can't resist, so Do-hyun should keep him away from his wife. Do-hyun leaves his card under Sung-ki's door every day until he decides to see him. The men meet at the beach, and Do-hyun makes his request. He wants Sung-ki to seduce Jung-yin to make her ask for a divorce. Unfortunately, Sung-ki refuses, clarifying that since he lost his true love Poppy, he hasn't been capable of loving again, so he would end up breaking Jung-yin's heart. Do-hyun doesn't care, knowing she'll get over it, thus Sung-ki begins considering submitting the job. First though, he needs to see Jung-yin out and about to have a better idea of her, which means Do-hyun will have to get her a job. Some days later, Choi and Song receive Jung-yin for an interview after Do-hyun inquired them for a favor. They like Jung-yin's rants because they could make for a funny section in their show, but Jung-yin asks for triple the pay, so Do-hyun will have to pay the difference to keep her busy. Thereafter, Jung-yin and Do-hyun go to a local cafe to celebrate her new job. While Do-hyun is inside making their order, Sung-ki takes the chance to strategy Jung-in with some flowers that surprisingly make her smile. The following day, Jung-yin debuts on the radio with her segment Afternoon Crasher, which is heard by Sung-ki and Do-hyun's co-workers. Then Do-hyun meets with Sung-ki, who has come to the conclusion that Jung-yin is a very complicated woman, so if he does this, he wants double the cash, which Do-hyun accepts to pay. Sung-ki's first invasion is to walk by the house only wearing a tank top, but Jung-yin finds him creepy instead of attractive. Sung-ki takes this personally and discovers a challenge in Jung-yin, so now he wants to do it for his own pride. He meets with Do-hyun again to ask him to make a list of every single thing he knows about Jung-in, and in return, Do-hyun asks him not to get physical with his wife. With all this evidence, Sung-ki prepares his house for his plan, and one afternoon, he pretends to be throwing out a bunch of china. Jung-in sees him and attempts to stop him because the china is in a good state, and Sung-ki cries to make her feel bad about her constant meddling. It works, and Jung-in invites him to her home for coffee. Subsequently chatting a bit, Sung-ki leaves while forgetting the box with the china on purpose. Jung-in goes to his house to give it back, and Sung-ki invites her to have a drink, impressing her by showing they have numerous interests in common and not minding how outspoken she is. Days pass and Jung-yin continues to work at the radio. Her segment is a total success, earning the radio tons of comments on their site when in the old days they would only get one spam bot, not to speak of the amazing ratings. Jung-yin begins to hang out a lot with Sung-ki, who often picks her up at work and takes her on a variety of dates while reminding her there's nobody wrong with liking someone as a person without needing to get intimate. Nonetheless, Sung-ki pushes naughty thoughts into her mind whenever he can, like the time he teaches her how to milk a cow by putting his arms around her and whispering in her ear. Jung-yin is grinning more now than she did for the last 7 years, and after she comments on the cow incident, Do-hyun begins getting worried and decides to follow them during their following date. Sung-ki and Jung-yin are on a carousel at an abandoned amusement park when Sung-ki notices Do-hyun spying on them, so he excuses himself for a moment to drag Do-hyun into the Ferris wheel. There, the men get into a fight, but Sung-ki manages to convince Do-hyun to confidence him because Jung-yin is almost wrapped around his little finger, he just needs a little more time. Later that evening, Do-hyun comes home to see Jung-yin hasn't made dinner as usual because she's too busy writing something for work. She's in such a good mood that she's constantly smiling and humming, she even goes as far as to play some music to dance to. Do-hyun stops up joining her, only for her to stop the music in order to tell him how much she misses their happy days in Japan with tears in her eyes. When she asks for a kiss, Do-hyun gives it to her even if he knows he shouldn't. Sung-ki had inquired him to stay cold to make the process faster. The couple ends up getting busy on the living room floor, only to be interrupted by a phone call that causes Jung-yin to interrupt their fun and leave the house. She says it's for work, but she certainly goes out with Sung-ki. Sometime later, Jung-yin and Do-hyun have dinner with Choi and Song. Choi has big news, they've been invited to go to Seoul and appear on the public radio, which is a huge chance for the whole country to meet her. Song accidentally lets slip that she and Do-hyun used to date and they meet each other nowadays as friends. Subsequently dinner, Jung-yin confronts Do-hyun about this since she didn't know, causing Do-hyun to snap at her. She usually hates all his companions and he refuses to be a shut-in like her, that's why he never said anything. Feeling insulted, Jung-yin wonders if they need a divorce before declaring she'll go to Seoul alone. Later, Do-hyun meets Sung-ki to thank him, but Sung-ki tells him it's too soon to tell. Do-hyun's residence alone now, so he tells Sung-ki his job is over, but Sung-ki decides he'll keep going for free. This is his final seduction and his reputation is at stake. Following day, Do-hyun is happy to wake up alone while Jung-in begins working hard in Seoul. Now she's able to go around town making interviews where she catches people doing immoral things and tries to make them talk on national radio. Each day that passes makes Do-hyun realize he may miss her after all, particularly when he can't cook for himself. One night, Jung-in appears at his place driving her own car, which she bought without warning him. She's brought him some food and an apology for being mean the other day, but she eventually admits she's got some problems and these new experiences are helping her work through them. Then she hugs and admits she's been having dreams about additional man, but it's the first time since they got married. Thereafter, Jung-in goes on a date with Sung-ki. Deciding to eventually open up more, she tells him that being married to Do-hyun was supposed to be enough, but not managing to have children frustrated the heck out of her, and seeing as she failed whenever she put effort into something, she decided to stop attempting. In return, Sung-ki tells her about losing Poppy to the ocean. Meanwhile at home, Do-hyun tries to call Sung-ki, but he won't pick up. He decides he needs to get drunk, and when he grabs the bottle, he discovers an old message from Jung-in. The note says that if he's drinking is because he must be feeling lonely, so perhaps this is the moment when he'll eventually hear her out. Jung-in wants to go to the hospital and try again because it's time to stop being scared and build a family. This message is sufficiently to make Do-hyun get in his car and drive all the way to see her. Meanwhile, Sung-ki is walking Jung-in home. The two of them almost kiss, and Jung-in admits she's had naughty dreams of him, so Sung-ki tells her it's eventually time for him to let her go, leaving her in tears. All this is seen by Do-hyun, who virtually runs Sung-ki over with his car when he crosses the street. Desperate, Do-hyun asks Sung-ki to drop the plan because he wants his wife back. She's a much more cheerful person now that she's working and going out. Nonetheless, Sung-ki's fallen in love with Jung-in as well. He throws Do-hyun on top of the car and refuses to give up, saying him that if Do-hyun tries to get her back, Sung-ki will tell her about their plan. Once Sung-ki leaves, Do-hyun visits Jung-in to tell her he misses her and wants her back. Jung-in doesn't pay much attention to him because she's got a killing hangover, and their conversation is interrupted by an earthquake that requires Do-hyun to go to the office. Subsequently, all that Do-hyun can do is try to find Sung-ki to stop him, because he isn't in the house following door anymore. One morning, he finds one of the numerous women crying at Sung-ki's door. When he mentions Sung-ki has moved out, the woman says she'll go to his other home, and Do-hyun gets the address out of her by promising revenge for breaking her heart. Some hours later, Jung-in, Choi, and Song trip to a fancy penthouse apartment, following an unidentified tip that told them about a Casanova that broke the hearts of hundreds of women. Jung-in is shocked to discover this Casanova is Sung-ki but decides to do the interview anyway, prompting Sung-ki to share his story while making beautiful art with sand. He's never told any woman that he loved them, he's always broken up with them gently and they never took it well. Subsequently he lost Poppy to the ocean. Sung-ki thought love was a cage and he wanted to punish anyone that believed in it, but that became useless as well and that's when he thought about ending things. Nonetheless he then met Jung-in, who made him believe in love again. Crying, Jung-in decides not to put this in the air while Song calls Do-hyun to tell him Jung-in is over hills over this Casanova dude. Subsequently Do-hyun rushes to meet Jung-in at their old home. She tells him she's considering going back to the countryside, but right now she doesn't want to talk about it. Nonetheless, Do-hyun pushes by mentioning Sung-ki, and when Jung-in gets defensive, Do-hyun admits he paid him to spend time with her, so everything she's seen in him is a lie. Crying, Jung-in begins yelling at him, upset for making her feel like nothing has ever truly loved her, and pushing him away when he thinks he can solve this by mentioning he's ready to go back to the hospital to have that baby. An earthquake interrupts their fight, and Do-hyun tries to tell her it's fine, but Jung-yin confesses she doesn't feel safe here. The following day, Jung-yin announces on the show that she's quitting. For her last rant, she complains about cowards that don't speak their minds and tells the story of a loser that paid a man to seduce his wife. People say she says too numerous negative things, but she thinks that's better than silence, and it was her way to keep the house lively while living a miserable life. Nothing should be used to silence, and that's why she's also announcing her divorce. Subsequently the show, Jung-yin goes to the beach to do some thinking and finds Sung-ki walking into the ocean. She takes him out before things got bad and calls the police to give them a ride. In the car, Jung-yin notifies Sung-ki that she had been attracted to him, but it's time for him to let Poppy go. When they arrive at their station, Do-hyun is waiting for them, wanting to talk things through with Jung-yin, but she reminds him he doesn't like chatting to her, so she's moving out to an apartment that she's rented with their savings. Sung-ki laughs at the whole deal, and later at the beach, he clarifies to Do-hyun that the only thing he had done was treat Jung-yin like a woman again. Perhaps he needs to remember that after earthquakes, people need to rebuild from the scratch. The following day, Do-hyun shows up at the house to help Jung-in pack. When the delivery boy tosses the newspaper at them again, this time is Do-hyun the one to come out to argue with him an insurance of his wife's sign. Seeing this, Jung-in accepts to spend one last night in the house. She takes the bed while Do-hyun stays in the living room, but in the middle of the night, Jung-in decides to lay down with her husband. When Do-hyun wakes up in the sunrise, she's already gone. 1 month later, Do-hyun and Jung-in meet at the lawyer's office to sign the divorce papers. While staying, he asks her why she had smiled when Sung-ki gave her flowers the first time, and Jung-in admits it was because Sung-ki's words had reminded her of what Do-hyun said the first time they met in Japan. Their conversation is interrupted by a lawyer telling them they're resuming work after lunch, so after Do-hyun complains to them over the wait, he asks Jung-in to go have lunch jointly. At the restaurant, Do-hyun complains again, this time to the waitress about a problem with the dishes. Jung-in scolds him for being mean to the staff, and Do-hyun admits missing her criticism. He explains he eventually understands she's behaved like that because she was lonely, and now he's going through the similar, making Jung-in smile. Unexpectedly, Jung-in thinks an earthquake is hitting them again and hides under the table, so Do-hyun takes the chance to join her and repeat the words he said the day they met as a way to ask her to begin over. Later, when the lawyers call their names, neither of them is at the office. Meanwhile, Sung-ki has taken over Jung-in's spot on the radio show, offering friendship advice. He's so good that Song can't support jumping on him right there in the middle of the workplace floor. And the end. Hi dudes, Climax 4 explain here. If you are a lover of similar content like this, take a look at my distinct videos, and if you love it, please break the like button and make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the notification horn, catch sight of you in the successive video.